Well, as we just heard, two former US Army soldiers have written an open letter to the people of Iraq. In it, Josh Steibler and Ethan McCord apologised for the attack on the van and more broadly for the war in Iraq and what they call the destructive policies of the US government. The letter says, quote, "The Wikileaks video only begins to depict the suffering we have created." They accuse the US government of ignoring the Iraqi people in favour of its public image. Well, the two served in Iraq for 14 months, and as we've seen, Ethan McCord was at the scene of the attack on the van. I spoke to him earlier today. Ethan McCord, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, can I start by asking you what went through your mind when you first saw the WikiLeaks video?
Right. Well, I didn't know that the there was actually a video until the day that it was released, and I had dropped my children off at school, went home, grabbed a cup of coffee, sat on the couch, and turned on the news, and saw myself running across the television screen carrying a child. My initial reaction was shock and anger that this scene that had been playing over in my head was now in front of my face.
What you finally saw on the video was what happened before you got there, starting with the helicopter gunners looking down on that group of men that, as we now know, included the two Reuters journalists. Now, tell me what you thought about that first attack. Was it reasonable from your perspective to have attacked those men on the ground?
From being in the perspective of the Apache helicopter crew, I can see where a group of men gathering when there's a firefight just a few blocks away, which I was involved in, and they're carrying weapons, one of which is an RPG. Their overall mission that day was to protect us, to provide support for us. So I can see where the initial attack on the group of men was warranted. However, personally, I don't feel that the attack on the van was warranted. It seemed more. I think that the people could have been deterred from doing what they were doing in the van by simply firing a few warning shots versus completely obliterating the van and its occupants.
Ethan, we know that soldiers in war are expected to kill, but one of the things people find disturbing about this video is the matter-of-fact way the gunners go about their business, and that they're very pleased when they see the bodies lying on the ground. Now, did you find that disturbing at all as a former soldier?
Well, you know, I think instead of the way that the Apache crew members were talking isn't unusual. It's kind of the way that we're trained to deal with our own personal emotions and feelings about the situations that we're placed in. It's almost like a coping mechanism. You use humor and say callous things to kind of dehumanize what had the people that you're fighting against, and you use that to push your real emotions down.
In the first attack, the Reuters journalists were killed carrying a camera and a tripod that were identified as being a weapon. In the second part, as you say, the helicopters shot up a van, and the people who were simply trying to help carry away the wounded. You clearly feel differently about that second attack.
Yeah, the second attack, which was on the van, again, I felt was not warranted. Now, in wartime, you're not supposed to go pick up the wounded, but how is every Iraqi citizen supposed to know that if you see somebody laying on the ground wounded, that you're not supposed to pick them up? I think it's a problem, definitely, that we engage this van with children inside it as well, simply for the fact of picking up a wounded person.
Did you see that particular attack on the van as a breach of the rules of engagement?
You know, when I was in Iraq, the rules of engagement were changing on almost a constant basis. There was never any actual rules of engagement that you stuck to the entire time you were there. There was many times that they changed, almost for a case for case, situation. So at that time, in 2007. I don't think that they actually broke the rules of engagement per se, but I feel on a more moral and human level, instead of engaging the van the way they did by simply firing a warning shot, being that this person was a citizen and not a combatant. If you were to fire a warning shot, say, in the general direction into the wall or something, they would have definitely dropped what they were doing and left.
The Wikileaks site refers to the footage they've shown as collateral murder. Do you think that's going too far?
I do. I personally feel that the way WikiLeaks released this video was more of a shock factor to try to it was more of a political way of releasing this. I feel that they could have been more responsible in the release of this video. I do know that when I watched the video, they made sure to point out the cameras that the journalists were holding, but failed to point out the weapons that the other people were holding as well. Collateral murder, I think, is going a little far as saying that soldiers intentionally murder civilians.
Ethan, let me take you back to what happened when you actually arrived on the scene. You'd heard the helicopters, you'd heard the shooting, but when you arrived there yourself on foot, what did you actually see? Describe that for us if you can.
Yes. When I got to the scene, I was one of the first 6 soldiers who were dismounted that day to arrive actually on the scene of where the Apaches opened fire. The first thing I saw was about 4 men laying on the ground, and they were pretty much completely destroyed. I've never seen anybody who had been shot by a 30-millimeter round before, and I don't want to see that again. It almost didn't seem real, in a sense that it looked more like I was looking at something that would be in a bad horror movie. I did also notice a couple of RPGs as well as AK-47s when I got to the scene. I could hear a small child crying, and the crying was coming from the van that was shot up. I ran over to the van and got to the passenger door, and there it was me and another soldier who's in my unit, and you can see in the video where we both get up to the van, and the soldier that I was with turns around, started vomiting at the sight of the children, and ran off, not wanting to deal with that situation or even look at that. Looking inside the van, I saw a little girl about 3 or 4 years old. She had a belly wound, as well as glass in her eyes and in her hair.